Making pirate bottles for my pirate-themed bar allowed me to experiment with some new techniques and materials. After saving some interesting bottles, my basic technique involves firstly removing the old labels using hot water and following with mineral turpentine to get rid of the sticky stuff. Next, I use aluminium oxide sandpaper to sand and distress the glass to make it look aged. If you do this, be sure to wear a mask or do it in a well-ventilated area, as sanding glass produces dust that you don't really want to breathe in. I'm looking for a worn look, so I make sure to distress each part of the bottle. A wash of black paint adds years of grime to the look. Next, I use Gorilla Glue to hold some string or rope in place that I wind around the top and also around the base of the bottle. Some barnacles and shells are next. I found these at the beach over summer. Again, I use Gorilla Glue to attach them to the glass. A bit of tape holds them in place while the glue dries. Next, I knock up a label in Photoshop. Taking down the opacity of the lettering adds to the aged, faded feel. The label is cut out and stuck to the bottle using a glue stick. Then I distress the edges with a bit of fingernail magic. Shellac also adds a nice yellowing tinge for extra aging. On one bottle I wanted to try a small skull for an extra piratey feel. After a lot of work, this proved to be only moderately successful, but I did get to try a mixture of techniques and materials. I started with a small tequila bottle that was in the form of a skull and tried my milk bottle skull technique to make a form around the small bottle. This involves heating a bit of plastic from a milk bottle and forming it around the mould using a damp sponge. You can see this technique in more detail in my milk bottle skulls video. As it turned out, this was never going to work as a skull in its own right, so I decided to try and use this form as a mould to make a small skull out of foam air-dry clay. I filled the mould as best I could and then sculpted a little extra where the mould was absent. You can smooth this clay down with water to give it a relatively smooth finish. The big problem with this technique and this material is that it needs to be open to the air in order to dry, so I chose to freeze the skull to solidify it so that I could remove it from the mould. This worked okay, but I quickly realised that the mould itself was pretty shonky, and despite my best attempts to re-sculpt the skull by picking out bits and adding new material, I ended up with a very ordinary looking skull. However, I went with what I had at this stage since I'd already put in a lot of work, and after all it was only an old bottle. Some more string, a label and a bit of black wash and this bottle was done. I've since set myself a challenge to sculpt a better skull. You can see the results of that in another video. Sometimes it seems you can't distress a label too much. After looking at some reference pictures, I gave this one some serious aging and a bit of shellac. Here's how the bottles look in the bar.